Today is June 21st, 2018. The Board of School Directors for School District of Upper Dublin special legislative meeting. It is 6:01 and we are in the Cardinal Room. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Ms. Good to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Ms. Good. Roll call, please, Ms. Evans.
Mrs. Franczyk. Mrs. Good.
Here.
Dr. Kim.
Excused.
Thank you. Dr. Ludwig. Mr. Ropsky. Mrs. Rothman. Mrs. Sherpier. Mr. Sirota. Dr. Levinowitz.
Here. Okay,
8
thank you.
present.
8 present. Okay, 1 excused. Okay, this is the welcome, and for me to do the welcome, I need to step up to the podium for this. We were planning to do a special presentation tonight. We were going to have some guests of honor. At least 4 state representatives were planning to be here tonight, but for some reason they decided approving a budget is more important than being at Upper Dublin and recognizing Dr. Wheeler on this special night, her last night serving in her role as superintendent for the School District of Upper Dublin. But we were able to get them to hand deliver this beautiful citation for Dr. Wheeler. And Dr. Wheeler, why don't you step up? Come on up. There's a lot of signatures on this, Dr. Wheeler. There's a lot of whereases. And then now, therefore, the House of Representatives of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania congratulates Deborah S. Wheeler upon her richly deserved retirement, commends her exemplary record of service and lasting contributions to the lives of the students, faculty, and staff of the School District of Upper Dublin, offers best wishes for a happy and rewarding future. This is signed by Representative Mert, Representative Dean, Representative Pfeiffer, I believe is your rep back home, and Representative Stevens, also by the Speaker of the House, Mark Terzai, and the Chief Clerk of the House. So on behalf of the House of Representatives, I present you with the citation. I wanted to thank the many individuals in the administration that helped facilitate that. It was not easy to get it done and to get it here tonight. So thank you, everybody who was involved. Okay, superintendent's report.
I echo Dr. Levinowitz's thanks to everyone. I'm deeply touched. Thank you. Briefly, the 2017-18 school year has now officially reached its end. Our students' last day was Friday. Our teachers' last day was Tuesday. So we will have a very brief respite until June 25th, when our extended school year and our summer scholars programs begin. They will close and allow a little bit of time for the buildings to be cleaned before the 2018-2019 school year begins on September 4th. Right now, that seems very far away. Soon it won't. So thank you to everyone for a successful school year, and best wishes for a successful school year next year.
Okay, so I'm sure everybody has looked at the agenda. We're focusing tonight on the Sandy Run Middle School new facility. There's also one motion about an exchange student that we'll do later this evening. And we have a presentation first that will be done by Arif Fazell from Dewey Engineering, who's our project manager, and also Robin Breslin. So we'll start off with Arif.
Thank you, Dr. Levinowitz. So one of the challenges we have is we're working on this every day, and sometimes we forget that we've got new people in the audience and people that don't see this on a regular basis. We've been working feverishly on developing different options, getting different input. So I'm going to just take a minute to just remind everyone a little bit about some of the previous slides and information that we've provided, just to give you a little bit of background. We didn't put a lot of those slides in because today the main focus is on what's called the schematic plan. The schematic plan is critical because one of the main focuses and purposes of the schematic plan is to make sure the spaces are the right size, the adjacencies are in the right location, the flow, and it basically must meet the educational specifications while considering all of the parameters that we have to deal with. And what I mean by that is our site. And you can see there are limitations on the site in terms of where the building goes. I'll just use an example. Today, we were talking about it, and Phil even mentioned, a lot of people are challenged by, okay, why does that building take the shape it does? Why doesn't it feel like a regular building on a greenfield site? And the reason is we've got existing buildings that we're trying to work around. So there are a lot of parameters on the existing site that I just want to take a minute to remind you. But today's focus is got to be on the schematic plan approval. If we feel that the schematic plan options, and by the way, at some point your head's going to spin because we have gone through options C1, D1, A1, we've got options all the way through. But in the end, I think we're going to bring it down to 3 options. We're going to explain to you what some of the benefits of each one are, some of the challenges that still might be with each option, because none of them are perfect, but we think we have an option that everybody feels comfortable with, that hopefully you feel comfortable with and can move forward. Without the schematic plan, we can't really talk about the schedule. And I can talk a little bit more about some strategies we have right now that give us some flexibility in the schedule, but ultimately, the more the schedule drags out, there's going to be a cost impact and certainly other impacts that we can talk about. So with that as a framework, that's the site. And what you see up there is you've got the main building and you've got the annex building to the right. And what you can't see on this is that there is a significant grade elevation drop. What I mean by that is it's almost 28 feet from the back of the building up against the homes as you start to come across to the play fields. There's a 28-foot drop. One of the things that you start to see right off the bat is we've got road access. Road access right now is off of Twining. We do have a rear entrance off of Audubon that, again, we're trying to capitalize on, as well as Twining. We have to look at how we're actually going to build this project while keeping it operational throughout the entire construction phase and keep the students and teachers safe while executing an effective and efficient construction project, because otherwise that'll result in cost. So with that said, I'll just jump to the next slide here and just show you. There's one of the big challenges we have. You can see in black the existing building. So it really leaves just that center area for the construction of the building, this center area here. The other thing that we have to keep in mind right about here, and you also sort of wonder, why doesn't this building slide down? Well, right here at the edges of this, the classroom wing, we are almost at the floodplain line. So we have a floodplain that we have to deal with. In addition to the 2 buildings, in addition to the grade elevation, and in addition to where our access points are for the site. I think ultimately we've spent many options, many variations of this. We actually, one of the benefits you got was through the architectural selection process, it was actually a design competition, because for them to win, they had to bring their best game. And we didn't really find I think as a group here, anything that was significantly different or that anybody could create that, was able to capitalize on the parameters that we had there, the opportunities as well as the challenges we had. So ultimately, we feel very comfortable that the site plan that we have and the organization of the site is going to be 100% better than what it is there. Is it going to be perfect? I can't sit here and say that because we've got those limitations of the site, Somebody has challenged us as, why don't we have an entrance off of Limekiln? It feels like you want to have one. Well, all you have to do is look at that intersection and you could probably answer some of that yourself. But we are going to bring that answer to you from the traffic expert. But those are just examples of things that everybody wants. The other thing you have to remember is every time we get input and feedback from stakeholders, which we have received a lot of, it starts to affect something else. So when we move something, it affects something else. And so there's constantly this movement, and you'll see as Robin explains to you the different options, even just in the classroom wing, how that starts to happen as we move. So hopefully that gives you some framework of the parameters, just for some of the new faces that might not have seen this, why the building is shaped the way it is and why it sits the way it is. So obviously one of the things you can see, we can't even build that building without affecting the annex. And so the decision has been made by the board and everybody that we will replace these with modulars. And that is an agenda item that we'll be talking about at the end of the meeting. But to really build this building efficiently, we want to create a barrier across here, right through here, so that we can keep school in operation with modulars and be building this on this side. It is a large building, and it will take a minimum of 2 years to construct the new building, again, depending on the timing of when we start the actual construction project. That big variable is factored by the approval process. Land development, stormwater, other things that I haven't talked about is the big challenge here is going to be stormwater, utilities, everything from water. The new building will be fully sprinklered. The existing building is not. We will have, obviously, sewer. We've got to get power. We have to have power to function both existing buildings, the modulars, as well as build the new building. So there's a lot of variables, challenges, but we've got a good plan going at this point. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin, who's going to walk you through, at this point, the different
Thank you, Arif. So what you're looking at right now is the schematic design site plan for option A. And one of the things that we'll be looking at on the 3-story classroom wing, which is right here, is a redistribution of the classrooms, the science labs, the special education to better meet your program. One of the other things that we're looking at from a practical situation is if we take some of the classrooms off this side of the building and we move them over here to this side of the building, we know that if you approve one of these designs, we can pull the building southward on the site down towards the flood line, and we can probably save some money in some of the grading and some of the retaining walls that might be required on the site up here. So there's advantages and disadvantages to the site depending on how we configure the 3-story classroom wing, which is what I'd like to focus on next. And if you remember, just for everybody, when you enter this building at the main entrance level, you're in between the 3rd floor of the classroom level and the ground floor of the classroom level. So when you walk across into the classroom wing on the entry level floor, you're in the middle floor because the site is sloping down towards the creek.
Let me just, it's easier if you say main floor, upper level, and lower level. Main floor, upper level, and lower level. Better way to look at it.
Right. Thanks, Art. So here's option A, and this is what was presented at the last board meeting. And the way that the distribution of these spaces works is green represents the science and blue represents the small group rooms. I'm sorry, the special education rooms. And if you see where the special education rooms are in this scheme, they have a folding wall between the two, so that gives them some flexibility if they're paired together like that they could open up the wall. As far as the classroom distribution goes, there's more classrooms on the left side in that wing than there are on the right side where the science classrooms are. So basically, you have all the teams on the left side, and then you have specialty classrooms on the right side. The other thing I'd want to point out too in all of the schemes is that you have the related arts back here. On the main level would be family consumer science, on the ground level would be the arts, and on the upper level would be the computer tech ed type lab. We also took a look at option A2 here, and the only thing in option A2 does different than option A1 is that we've added more small group collaboration spaces throughout the corridor system. You have it here, you have some tables in here, and we added some square footage down here to have some more small group areas. Option C takes a look at shifting some of the classrooms from the left side of the building and moving them over here to the right side of the building. The science and special education are not affected by this change. But you have now a shorter wing on the left side with 3 classrooms on one side of the corridor and 5 on the other. And then you have 5 classrooms on the right side. And if you recall, this would give you an advantage on the site plan because it would ease some of the grading restrictions since the left side is not as long as it was in the previous scheme. Another option that we looked at was option C2, which again kept the science labs and the special education where they are. It has the 3 classrooms and 5 classrooms on the right side, so there's 8 classrooms there, and then there's 5 classrooms to the right. But all we did in this scheme that was different was we cleaned up the entrances to the classrooms. We revised the classroom doors so that they had a better order in that corridor. And we added the small group collaboration space too. With regard to C1, this was a scheme that we looked at. It's the same as C and C2 for most practical purposes. However, the big difference in C1 is that we've added a 4th stair at a very key location. This location makes it easy for students who are on the upper floor or the lower floor here to get to the stair, get up a level or down a level to the main floor to get across the bridge to the cafeteria. If we don't have this stair, they have to come down here, use this stair, and then when they get onto the main floor, they're going to come down the corridor in front of these classrooms. That was thought to be a negative by some of the teachers on the input that we received. So the problem with this scheme is that 4th stair adds a lot of square footage and cost, but it does make the building function better from a traffic analysis standpoint. So another set of options that we looked at was option D. Now this option shows the special education classrooms paired and off to the end of the corridor, which is something we don't want to do. PDE doesn't want us to do that. They want us to incorporate special education into the main classrooms so they don't feel like they're off by themselves. So what we did in this scheme is we just simply labeled the 2 classrooms down by that stair as special education, but we made them the same size classroom as all the other classrooms on the corridor. That way you can move those special education classrooms to any other classroom that you want. In fact, you'd have the flexibility to change them from year to year depending on your educational program if it changes, or your enrollment sizes go up or go down. So that is the option. Or I'm sorry. Oh yeah. The other big thing that we did in this option was we broke the science classrooms up. There's now 2 labs in the center section, but we moved 2 other labs down to the west wing, and you have now 6 classrooms devoted around those 2 science labs, and over here you have 7 classrooms devoted by the middle 2 science labs. So what you're starting to see here is the manifestation of the input that we receive from the teachers and the administrators that they would like to see the teams more balanced in the corridor system. And in particular, a de-emphasis of the students that are coming down this corridor and coming across the bridge, and more of an emphasis on the circulation over here coming towards this bridge and across. So it allows better traffic flow in this scheme. The last option that we took a look at built on option D, we call this option D1. And in option D1, we split the science classrooms. But the big difference is in D1 is we are giving a home to the special education classrooms, and we're returning them to the smaller size that was originally programmed. So that will cost less money from the standpoint of relative to option D because those classrooms are smaller. However, these classrooms now are centered in the core of each of the teams, just like the science rooms are. And again, this was input that we were receiving from the teachers and some of the special education teachers about distribution of the special education. So we think there's some educational advantages to option D1. It's not the most expensive of all the options, but it does provide a nice distribution of special education. So for option D1, what we wanted to show is all 3 floors. The main floor is in the middle, the upper floor and the above, and the lower floor below. The purple bluish color is the special education classroom distribution. You can see the small group rooms and the different size special education classrooms are pretty nicely distributed. You don't have them clustered or down at the end of a hallway anywhere. So they're incorporated nicely into the plan. So that's it for the plans. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Arif again, who's going to focus on the cost.
So if I just, before I just do that, we have this chart that we put together to just sort of summarize everything. But one of the things I just wanted to go back up, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. One more. I just want to focus on one thing and just remind everybody. So, okay, there we go. So let's just, that was Robin's last slide. And one of the things I just want to take a minute to remind you, the things that came out of all of these options, and the reason all of these options were developed were, number one, collaboration space. That was brought up numerous times, how we incorporating that. And I just want to remind you on this, again, for the people that haven't seen these plans. We have a central, very efficient, very flexible collaboration space right here in the middle. And we have multiple layouts to show how that can be used. So that was always there. So more collaboration space. You can see we started to develop some outside these special ed rooms. Robin pointed out different options have different collaboration spaces here by the stairs, at the ends over here. And, you know, there's discussions about perhaps some folding partitions and how collaboration actually occurs within the classrooms themselves. But I think everybody felt like when you look at this and you see how much collaboration space there is down this hallway, and this happens on every floor, by the way, the upper floor, as Art said, and the lower floor. That is a lot of collaboration space. This space right here, I think one layout, you can almost have 100 in there. So you could have 100, you could have less, you could have more. It's right at the center. It's across from the library on the upper level. It's across from some of the other, you know, I think the STEAM room, is it called? Or what's it called? The project team room, right? So there's all of these different collaboration spaces, and that was one of the big things. Now, we haven't even focused on the main area of the larger spaces, but there's obviously opportunities to do collaboration there. But within the classroom wing alone, which is where, you know, all the teaming occurs and everything occurs, that was a big thing. So a lot of these options, you'll see different collaboration space. The other one was flow. So Robin talked about it. This stair seems to be a feature that everyone liked, because at this level, it's at a great location where you come down or you go up or whichever the case is, and you go across this hallway and you're right at the cafeteria, you're right at the gym and all of the other functions. Certainly this hallway is going to be heavily used also. And then you have a nice stair right here. At both of these main focal points, we have an elevator. We have an elevator there and we have an elevator here. So again, traffic flow and functional, each of the different options has different parameters that focus on that. So that was a number 2 thing. The third one was, of course, educational. You know, where are the classrooms? Where are the science rooms? How is the teaming working? Where are the special ed rooms? How are we making the spaces function better from an every day, every minute use? So again, I think Robin covered that really well. Those were the other, that was the third big parameter that came out. And then the one that I'm going to focus on that never came out is cost. Okay, so that's my job, is cost, schedule, right, and getting this thing built efficiently. Okay, so one of the things we'd be remiss in doing is talking about how these options start to affect schedule. Just to go back again from a summary, the existing building's about 178,000 square feet. Over a year ago, when we came out with some initial program requirements, we were looking at a building that's 208,000 square feet. As we developed and got input, and this is pretty common, all the spaces, more collaboration space. I'll be honest with you, when we had the 208, there was no collaboration space. There really wasn't, just to be honest. I mean, you can go back and look at the records, but there really wasn't any. It wasn't brought up. I'm not an educational specialist. I didn't bring it up, so I guess I'm at fault for that too. But we didn't have it. So as we started to develop the program, I think the architects did a tremendous job of getting us to 210,000 square feet and still incorporating all the collaboration spaces. Every one of our spaces, auxiliary gym, auditorium, cafeteria, music rooms, we have more than anything we have at the current building. In every space, in every size, in every which way you want to look at it. Okay, we have more. And that's good because certainly we're building for the future, but we have to remember where we were. So we were at 210. We also had 7,800, 7,600 square feet of mechanical space. That is, easily, it's efficient space that just becomes as a function of the way the design does, but it has a cost impact. It has a lot of benefit mechanically in terms of how mechanical equipment's, life of it, how it's serviced, all of that. But it is a cost thing. So at this time, we were looking at about $1.5 million over our $70 million budget. So I proposed, and I think everyone bought into it. I think we bought into it. I know we have because I'm not going back to it. But the auxiliary gym, we decided would be an alt. Not again because we don't want the auxiliary gym, but at some point I need to give you choices to make with real costs because I don't really know what they're going to be about. Real costs are going to be in April of next year or May or June, whatever date we pick. So there's a lot of things going on in the construction industry right now, a lot of variables. I'm hoping things will settle down and we'll be in a great position. That's what we're going to strive for. But we need to have some options. So the auxiliary gym became an alternate after we were kind of falling in love a little bit with option A.
Well, Reef, an alternate delete.
An alternate delete.
Delete.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yep. Meaning it's in the base bid and we'll get a price to see if we don't want to do it, what it is. And at that point, we can make a decision from a financing standpoint, from a community standpoint, and, obviously the board's going to have to make that decision. Then, you see, I'm not going to repeat all these, but Robin went through all these options, and, I put a cost premium on them because what happens is the square footage grows. And again, we can't get into details right now because all we're doing is dealing with that footprint. So will it adjust a little bit up and down as we do the estimates? But I think we have enough variability in the whole project to account for it. So these are, sort of ballpark estimates at this point of what the different options add to it. And I think if you decide to make a decision and go with D1 or C1 or stay with A, you now are able to at least have an idea of what the cost premium is, if any, to go to those options. So that's what we've done. I've highlighted A, C1, and D1 because I really think of all the different options, those are the ones that you should focus on because otherwise in between it, they're just slight variations of each one. And we, as a team, I think, have met so many times that we just think you're down to those from our team standpoint. And then I think we're now going to turn it over to the administration who's going to talk to you a little bit about why maybe one of them from their perspective is better than the others.
Okay.
So if you're,
Yeah,
okay?
let me do that. Mark, is there anything you want to add before we move on to administrators? Anything about the building? No? Okay. So what we thought we'd do now is hear from our administrators. One of the reasons we are behind, we originally planned to do this on the 4th and then the 14th, and we're at 21st now, is that we
Actually,
wanted...
it was originally May.
It was May.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that
Right?
we really wanted to
Yeah.
go back and make sure we were doing this right. We felt that we did not get enough input from some administrators and from our staff at the middle school. And between that time, we did go back and we spent quite a bit of time listening, showing them some of the options and getting some fantastic feedback from them. And we're thinking that we've incorporated a good deal of that feedback from them. And what we'll do now is hear from the principal from Sandy Run Middle School, Dr. Jill Clark, in terms of where we are right now, what process we've used, and some of her opinions about where she would like to see us move forward with.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Levinowitz, and good evening, everyone. While I do ramble and speak ad nauseum at school in front of kids and teachers, tonight I do have prepared notes so I don't do the same to you. I'm proud to stand here before you this evening as an educational leader of the district and proud principal of Sandy Run. We as a design team have spent a lot of time reviewing the many options, and we've provided many opportunities for teachers and staff voices and we've also taken them out on site visits. I initiated conversations with our teachers back in October 2015. We called it a wish list. What could you accomplish in a new or renovated Sandy Run, and what could we accomplish? There were many suggestions made and subsequently shared with the design team, everything from bathroom ventilation, please, to music rooms adjacent to the auditorium, as well as the most important, please allow us to educate our children and facilitate instruction in one building. Long ago, when we met in this room to talk about what would be the best placement for middle-level learners, specifically 6th grade, we talked then about 21st century learning, and we talked about collaborative spaces. And Arif is right. When we initially came up with option A, collaborative spaces were on the list, but when we prioritized classrooms, initially we didn't see where collaborative spaces would fit. So we are appreciative of all the work of the architects and the design team, engineers, etc., who have now, in option D1, included collaborative spaces throughout each of the academic floors, West Wing, East Wing, and that center knuckle we've referred to it as. The iterations of building options you see this evening include the collective of teacher voices and much more. And we also have some teachers with us tonight. We're glad that you're here. We hope you see the many merits also. Of all the options, D1, which is, can I go back to that screen? I don't want to touch that. Looks like a hair trigger. Sure. Option D1 is my favorite, and Dr. Levinowitz, I thank you for allowing me to share my opinion, because this particular model incorporates the teacher voices. As of last Friday, June 15th, we heard from every teacher, met with the design team. We had small groups by department to talk about what this blueprint looks like and what they would like to see inside of it. Some of the key pieces are the classrooms are clustered, East Wing, West Wing. Looks more balanced. The science labs are embedded in the team clusters. The special ed rooms are embedded in the team clusters. Once again, those green and blue spaces. It's optimal for students and teachers' needs now and in the future, right? It's easy to say what we need for 2022, 23, but it's much bigger than that. Even my youngest teacher will be retired by the time the life of this building has been reached, right? We're talking about a 50-year plan. With the exception of Mr. Rooney here, who's probably ageless. So small group instruction, again. Small group instruction is afforded via D1. We have small collaborative spaces, science, special ed, where we are together. The library there on the main floor is also it's adjacent to the knuckle, so that's also the hub and a large feature of this D1 option. So when I look at today's rising 3rd graders, which we hope will be the first group of students to be 6th graders in a new facility, we're excited. And I think I can speak for the teachers in saying that we're proud and really excited at the possibility of being the stewards of their growth and learning and achievement, continued achievement, because we've got awesome kids, in a model envisioned here by D1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Clark. We'll move on. Ms. Clegg, Director of Pupil Services, and how some of the input that you and your colleagues and your staff have provided to get us to where we are right now regarding special education.
I wanted to start off with just expressing my gratitude and respect for the members of the team that worked so hard over the course of the year to provide so many viable options for us to consider. I certainly will say that Plan A and D1 meet the needs of our special education students, as well as all of the departments and pupil services, which includes the nurse, the counselors, psychologists, our related service providers. So both plans provide for all of those students and all of those staff members. I think I'm glad I'm not a board member tonight, because I do think it's a very, very difficult decision, and appreciate your consideration. I know it's hard to balance, as we do all the time, what is a need and what is a want, and all these iterations kind of outline both. So just wanted to say thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. Clegg, you mentioned A and D1. Are you implying that C1 does not meet the needs?
If we can go back to C1, the amount of physical space that is provided for pupil services is also outlined in C1. I don't see a significant difference. I do see a significant difference in the cost. Again, looking at balancing the wants and the needs and the fiscal responsibilities, C is, I think, the most expensive option, so it just doesn't make sense. But again, that's my opinion.
No, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that all of three of the options that we're mostly considering do meet the needs. Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to turn to Ms. Morrison next, if she has any comments at this time.
Good evening. I also concur with Dr. Clark in terms of the optimal use of, the optimal use of learning space for our students as we think about the curricular needs moving forward. For me, the opportunity for teaming at the middle level, which is something that has been in place for a long time, and I believe will continue to be in place for a long time because it supports the needs of middle school learners. One of the experiences that the middle school had was looking at a new schedule, and in doing so, that team came up with what we believe about middle school learners, and teaming is at the core of that. Placing the science rooms within the teams, having special education within the teams is a very, very positive model, and you can see that reflected in D1. There are opportunities for collaboration, not only a large group collaboration that you see in the knuckle, but also small group collaboration that you see outside of classrooms. With the use of some flexible walls to further opportunity for collaboration are also things that can be discussed as we move into the future. But overall, I believe D1 is a very, very positive scheme for Sandy Run Middle School.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Morrison. Mr. V, you have something to add, Dr. Clark?
I'm sorry, Phil. Come on up, Phil. I'll be a second. I also wanted to add that some of the other options presented from the wings, like I think that option A had 11 regular ed classrooms exiting at one time. So our bell schedule, as Mrs. Morrison referenced, has been designed so that we do not have all three grade levels in the hallway at one time. Now that these proposals or options include one grade level per floor, this one here, D1, also with 3 of the 7 classrooms being special ed, learning support, and we're not going to have that much traffic at the end of each class, which certainly lends to a better climate and culture in the building. Okay, thank you. That was my 2 cents.
Mr. V, I just want, I don't want to assume that everybody understands this as well as we do, because we're still learning. Just point out the library and the room next door. It's labeled because of PlanCon. So I think it's important that we identify that, and then also to point out that on the other 2 floors, that project-based learning room serves their role as their special ed rooms. So we've identified special ed rooms, but there's other 2 large special ed rooms
Sure.
in the building.
So if you look at this, you have the bottom floor,
where you'll have nothing in that space. You will have ground. And then on the main floor, we have a library. That's a two-story library, and off of that library, you have our PBL studio. The idea being that in the 20th century, kids went to libraries to do research. Today, they go to the library to engage in all kinds of the whole scheme of media literacy, which may involve 3D printing something, green screening, doing digital storytelling. So you used to send kids to the library. You'll still send kids to the library to do that. It's important to have that PBL studio as a supervised space that doesn't necessarily need to be manned by an adult all the time, just line of sight from the librarian who's giving students permission to use that space. And then above it, you see on the upper floor, that's a special education space. So while it looks big when you're just looking at it here, right, it's a unique space there on the main floor. I can only just affirm what's been said already. One, incredibly deep appreciation for the process. And, there's this process called the critique that people go through when, if you ever watch Shark Tank. And our architects and engineers went through that, right? They just, to come up to people to say, yep, try again. And working creatively within the many constraints that we have here with site, with budget, with building concurrent to using a space. But I'll put on my hat here as a 10-year middle school science teacher. Proximity is a really big deal. Having taught in a very progressive school, project-based learning school, doing integrated project-based learning with my social studies colleagues, my math, my English, when we can open those doors and have kids moving just across the hall to do something, when my kids are clustered in small groups and I am circulating among small groups while the social studies teacher is circulating among small groups, that's really, really powerful. And I've done that. I've also had my room switched on me, or had a partner's room switched on me, or the team divided so that there was distance between us. And the impact on student learning suffered. So proximity really, really matters when you're doing that kind of dynamic work. And I'm super excited that that's the direction that our faculty are taking themselves in our work right now with the Personalized Learning Initiative at Sandy Run, and that's only going to grow into the future. So this is a model that best supports that practice moving into the future. I share Ms. Clegg's sentiment, right? It's expensive. That's a concern. That's a hard concern. But again, that's an expense that you're distributing over 50 years, right? We're making this investment for 50 years, and we only have one opportunity to get these things placed correctly.
May I just ask a quick question, Mr. V? The science rooms, you mentioned that you spend time in science rooms, and I've heard the term used, science light. Can
Sure.
you explain that a little bit more?
So we have science rooms and science light, and that's really part of just sort of specking out that space, right? So typical science classroom, you picture wraparound cabinetry, counters, sinks, and then there is some sophisticated infrastructure that's put in into a science classroom that's not in a typical classroom, right? I need to have a little shower there for eye wash, etc. In a science light classroom, there's an appreciation that I don't need a high school science facility for middle school science typically. I don't need to have all the constant wraparound counters, and typically in a given year, like for example this year, we have a science teacher who teaches science half the time in the room and social studies half the time in the room, and that may happen. So science light is a recognition that I can have some of my science classrooms be a little bit smaller. I don't have to have cabinetry that wraps all around. I can leave one of those walls open. I still have enough storage because I have shared storage, and I have a partner right next to me with a full science lab. And that's going to be sufficient for most of the types of science that happen at the middle school level.
Okay. Are there any other comments from any of our administrators? Lester, do you have any? As a facilities director, anything?
In some of the meetings, as I've stated before, I'm not looking at this from education standpoint. I'm strictly bricks and mortar, and what I'm looking at, I am looking at costs, I'm looking at efficiencies. I understand what everybody's saying, how they like their classroom structured. As a facility operator, I do like rooms clustered, same rooms clustered. I do like the clustering of science rooms, just for my utilities, any natural gas, water, drains, showers, ventilation for hoods. I do like that as an operating standpoint and an installation standpoint, that they're on the same area, so I share resources.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, obviously, that's one of the reasons for the additional cost moving to D1 is when you're separating the two science, two on one side and two on the other, there's going to be an additional cost. I wanted to point out, too, that on the left side, the science rooms, those two science rooms have a wall that butt out. We're still looking at the option of maybe bringing that wall in, and that would reduce the footprint by, I think it's 948 square feet that can come in, and that's, I think, consistent with Mr. V's comments regarding science light. I think in this design right now, Mark, maybe you can help me, but I believe there's one classroom that's smaller.
Yeah, as it's drawn right now, as we have spec'd it out, well, as we originally spec'd out, there were 4 science classrooms per grade, full science labs. We didn't have this concept of something smaller than a full science lab. In further discussions and looking for opportunities to reduce the square footage, we decided that 6th grade in particular really didn't need full science labs. They needed what was referred to earlier as science light, and 7th and 8th grade could make do with 3 science labs and 1 science light. And so that's what's shown on this floor. So where the cursor is in the middle section of the hallway, as drawn right now, is thank you, Robin, is a science light classroom, and the other 3 are full science labs. That conversation seems to be still ongoing about what we really need for science classrooms for middle level education. And if we decided that we really can make do, for instance, the science teachers, when we met with them to discuss the interiors of the rooms, said, well, for middle school, we don't really need sinks all the way around the edge like we typically have. Maybe we just need 2 wash tub kind of facilities. And if that really is the case, and when we get down to the nitty gritty, maybe we can reduce the square footage of all the science labs, which would pull in that wall, which saves considerable complexity in that wall, which saves more money than just the square footage would save. So there are, those discussions are still ongoing. But right, as it is drawn right now, all 3 floors have 3 what I'll call full-size science labs and 1 science light classroom.
Right, and even as we move forward tonight, if we do make a recommendation of one of these designs, there could be an adjustment made to those classrooms. Okay. So at this point, as is normal practice after a presentation, there could be questions from the board or comments. We will be voting tonight on one of these options. Obviously, there will be community input after the board comments. So are there any board comments or questions for Arif or Robin? Ms. Rothman?
All right.
Ms. Sherpia?
First of all, many thanks for all of those who provided input in this plan. I think we've moved forward quite a bit since the earlier designs. A couple of questions. One was that, Arif, I think you mentioned that C1, the moving south, if I may call it that, would actually potentially result in some savings of the retaining wall. Is that included in your cost and the way you projected it, or is that a separate thing?
Yeah, I think that's just a side note by Robin. Right now, there is no way to know that because we haven't really begun the grading and the stormwater design in earnest. I think that was just a point Robin was making that as the classrooms start to shift more to the right side of the page, if you will, you start to have a little more room on the left side. That's all. I'm not sure how significant an impact that'll be, because if you look on the right side, the floodplain is pretty close there too. So there's just these 20 feet, 40-foot differences that can make a lot of difference up top on the retaining wall. But I think at this point, to make a decision based on that would not be advisable. I think you should base your decision on the footprint here and the costs that we have. They don't include all of that.
By my estimate, the
right.
difference in how far south you could shift it is approximately maybe 15 feet. It's
Yeah.
not a big difference.
It's not in the cost.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yep. Let me see. All right. In this presentation, I like the way the focus is very much on the educational model.
Right.
I mean, I think that's where the emphasis should be. If we're looking at cost at all or savings potentially, I think, can you speak at all to the other part? So the auditorium, the gym, that part. Is there any way that we can shrink that in so that we can reduce cost there? Because I rather spend money on
Education.
that educational wing and maybe shrink, say, the auditorium, which to me is a typically underused
Right.
space.
So I think we've done 3 or 4 things already in that area, because we focused heavily in that area initially, because that was the area that had to flow well together in terms of the big footprint. So we focused heavily on that area. So the one thing we did was, the planetarium size is the minimum 30-foot dome. So we've kept that to the 30-footer versus there were discussions of a 40 and a 50-footer. So I think we've already done the planetarium. The auditorium, at one point we were talking about more seats in the auditorium and size of the auditorium. We've already brought that down to what we believe is a right size, but not too small, but also not as big as maybe some people had hoped. So we're down to, I think, 480, 490
490.
seats. So again, I think we've taken that big space and made it as small as possible. We haven't shrunk the stage or looked at places like that, but because we believe the stage can be one of those areas that could have multi-purpose type functional uses that can be used during the day. So those are 2. The cafeteria, we looked at that really hard with the cafeteria, and we just felt that we needed to have enough space to allow for some flexibility with additional student capacity. It doesn't have a lot more, but it's got a little bit of flexibility for some growth in enrollment in the cafeteria, because otherwise that becomes a real problem. Can't expand it. So we looked at that. And then, of course, the gym. And the gym, what we concluded after, again, getting stakeholder input from community, and I am shocked at how much activity goes on there. If you go there after school, it's phenomenal, right? And so certainly this is a community asset. And I think the compromise there is that auxiliary gym as a deduct alt. I think that's where the compromise occurred there. And then other than that, the team rooms, we looked at the locker rooms and team rooms, really skinnied those up, because today we're not doing a lot of showering there. There's not a lot of kids using that. So from a showering standpoint, so we looked at the team locker room and have shrunk those. So I think we've worked hard there, other than actually taking a room out. When we start to look at the music areas and band, we have the right number of rooms there. But I think we've really focused hard on that footprint already. And then other than that, you got a mechanical room and administration and guidance. That's really all you have there. And go back to that. Where is that? You don't have that floor plan. We can find it. But I think I've covered them all, Teacher, I think. But so we've worked hard already on that. I'm not sure there's room unless, we want to eliminate a space. But shrinking them anymore, I don't think is very practical. It is a big footprint, but you know, a basketball court is just that size. You know, and then we have a fitness room, not very large. And other than that, I think I've covered all the space.
I think there's, going back to all the discussions we've had, I think there's really only two opportunities of things that could be made smaller, but they are the size they are for very good reasons.
Right.
And they're both in the gyms. The auxiliary gym is bigger than we need for the academic program, but is what we need for community use.
Right.
And the main gym is the space that's big enough for the entire school. It is actually probably a little bit bigger than it needs to be, not a lot, but it just ends up that big when you try to have sideways courts as well as the main court. It ends up, we have probably a little bit more seating than we need, not a lot more seating than we need, but that's a result of having long sideways courts. Unless you wanted to give up on any of those things, I agree with the Reef. We have skinnied up that part of the building about as skinny as it's going to get.
Yeah, so again, just real quick, there's the main gym, the team rooms, locker area. We kind of really combined them. At one point, they were all separate. That's the auxiliary gym that we've talked about as an alternate deduct. You know, we've talked about the auditorium. I think we've done a nice job of doubling up on bathrooms here. So these bathrooms can be used for cafeteria. They can also be used for auditorium. They can be used for gym, auditorium, etc. And then, you know, there's the cafeteria, and then this is the planetarium and the music area. There's, you know, not much other, because these spaces are all single story, so there's nothing above them or below them, clearly. So I think we're at the point where you're either going to delete something now or leave it the way it is, because otherwise it becomes not very functional.
Anything else, teacher?
One more thing. The world language rooms, are they incorporated in the team rooms, or are they being used when the teams are not using them? Can you speak to that?
Is there a particular option that you want me to focus on?
Yeah, they are separate rooms, if that's what you mean. They're not being shared with the teams. We haven't assigned where
But
exactly where
they are
separate.
well used, and we don't have Mr. Albert here who could rattle us off the top of his head. Dr. Clark, could you?
The world language rooms are on all three of our floors. Currently, in the current building, we have 5 dedicated world language rooms, so we'll have 5 that are spread out throughout the 3 floors in the new option.
I think the question was about utilization of those rooms, right, Titia? Or was it where are they, or how often are they used?
Well, certainly in both, really. I mean, where are they, and are they going to be used all full time? Are they?
Yes, they are full-time. There will be room sharing, right? My grandiose plan at the start of this process was I want every teacher to have their own classroom. Well, you know, I got laughed out of the room. So there is room, there are classrooms that will be shared. World language may share a room, health may share a room, you know, with the core and core subjects. UA rooms, because of their needs, the unified arts rooms, specialized art, FAMCON, music, etc., are specialized, so we don't often have core or world language teachers push into those rooms, but we do have the opposite. World language rooms, world language teachers can go into any of the core rooms or the UA rooms when not in use.
But there are 5 rooms in the building that are marked. I mean, they're not marked on this plan, but they are earmarked as world language classroom.
And the way we designed the world language classrooms and the regular classrooms is pretty much the same. So as far as I know at this point, we could move them, we could shift them around anywhere throughout the corridor system.
Teacher, anything else? You good? Any other, Ms. Rothman?
So first, thanks. I know the last several weeks especially have been pretty busy with different ideas being thrown around, but looking at all the options, of course, I like bits and pieces of different ones, and I just want to confirm. So my favorite, just I like I like C2 for the 3 rooms on the other side. In my view, those would be the world language areas, classrooms over there. But what I really like the most is having the science rooms as part of D1. And looking at D itself, which has 2 of the classrooms pushed down, and I know they're labeled special ed classrooms, but if we'd ever go with that option, they would not be used that way. I just want to confirm that if we had 3 classrooms over there like we do in C2, and we had the science classrooms like we do in D1, that would be the most expensive option. So it would be similar to D, it's just adding another classroom. Right, taking a classroom from the wing, so it'd be similar to C2 in the balance of classrooms.
Yeah, I think I can, while Robin is finding that, though, if you look at D1 while it's up on the screen, and go ahead and change it when you find what you're looking for, Robin,
Can't-
but
I think I'm locked up.
it ends up that long because that's how long it needs to be to accommodate 2 teams in special ed. In D, it accommodated 2 teams and not special ed. And so you couldn't really take another one and still have 2 teams. You couldn't take one from there and put it on the other side and still have 2 full teams and science.
Yeah.
Right, actually, right, it'd be a team and a half would be in the west wing. Would be over there. There'd be the 2 teams actually in the middle part. I'm just wanting to make sure that moving 3 classrooms over to the right side and moving science, splitting up science, having 2 science in the one wing, 2 science in the other, that would be the most expensive thing that we could do.
And a staircase?
No, not a 4 staircase.
Okay, well, there are issues if you don't put
Right.
fourth staircase that they need to address.
Then the concern would be flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think if you add the staircase, then absolutely.
Right.
But without it, you can see D is a little bit more than D1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it would go much higher, but it does mess up, I think, the teaming arrangement, which Mark was talking about.
Yeah, I think Sarah was trying to resolve that by saying, because basically we have 2 full teams over on the west side, in D1.
Right.
We have 2 full teams over on the west side and a team and a half in the center section. And she was saying if you had a team and a half over on the west side and then 2 teams spread across the center and the right, but it doesn't, you still don't have that hub where 4 classrooms basically all open together and they're all across the hall because those classrooms on the right are not adjacent to science. And there aren't 9 other classrooms that are not core team or special ed to put over there. So I don't know that it's a realistic layout if the goal is to optimize teams. But again, it doesn't have to be the goal to optimize teaming. Every time you try to optimize something, you compromise something else. So D1 optimizes teaming. If you're willing to give up a little bit on that optimization, then you could do that.
Right. I guess
But
in my plan, you wouldn't have to give up the teaming because those 3 classrooms across the side, 9 up and down, those are your world language classrooms, your health classrooms, things like that.
well, the things like that are world language and health, which is 6. So unless you want to add special ed into those 3, then there isn't, we don't have any other classrooms to put over there that are not a core subject and wants to be adjacent to a science.
Okay. So some of those classrooms would be critical reading rooms then? Is that what part of that 9 would be?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Reading support, I think what you meant, not critical reading.
Oh, reading support, not critical reading.
Or what do we, what's it? No, but I'm not talking about critical reading. There's reading
It's critical reading and reading strategy.
reading strategies is what the word I was looking for. Those you could put reading strategies over there.
Okay.
There's 2 of those.
2 of those. All right. And those aren't core classrooms. Those are classes, special ed classes, essentially. or support classes? Not support classes, right?
Critical reading is a core class in 7th grade, and reading strategies are reading support classes for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, not necessarily special ed students who need additional support in reading.
Okay. And in any of these plans, are there special rooms for the critical reading classrooms, those core classrooms?
There are classrooms, I believe there to be 2 classrooms for critical reading and 2 for reading strategies.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought someone else would ask this question, but I know we talked about the placement of the science classrooms on the lowest floor so that against the central hallway. That may not be something that has to be decided within the scope of what we're deciding tonight, but
We were talking about that earlier tonight, that there's now a classroom rather than the science.
and that's okay.
Well, Robin will comment
Okay.
on that.
We're not at the point where we can work it out just yet, but we believe strongly that we can get a window into this classroom right here between the toilets and science lab. Now, the science labs, we already know are going to have higher windows because of the casework. So this particular classroom might not have the exact same configuration of windows as the other classrooms, but we know we can get windows into that classroom. And you do have one oddball classroom, which is the health classroom. It seems like that might be able to go anywhere, and maybe that's the location for it. So there are, as Arif was saying, every time you change something to get an advantage for it, something else is going to suffer. This is what suffered. You focused right in on it.
Okay. No, thank you, because I like the way the design of D1 is, and it keeps the teams together, and it gives you, it seems like it has a lot of benefits that way. So, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Ms. Francis?
Yes, thank you to everyone on the team and all of the staff at Sandy Run for contributing to, I think, some important discussions and changes. One question I have about just the long-term flexibility of the building and looking at D1, since that seems to be of strong interest to the team. When you moved from D to D1, the special ed classrooms shrank in size and therefore are not equal in size to the other classrooms. So therefore, they would essentially be shoehorned in as special ed classrooms long-term. And I guess my concern, and I think we don't need to decide tonight, so that's, I guess, what I wanted to clarify. If we wanted to finagle it down the road that all the classrooms were uniform in size so that we did have more flexibility over the next 50 years, we're not deciding that tonight. We can decide on the footprint for D1 and theoretically address that. Is that correct?
Exactly.
That is correct. And what I would explain is that we could take these classrooms where they're at, and rather than have this collaboration space in front of them, we
gives
could
us
make it
some
a full-size classroom.
Yeah.
And we can make that decision months from now.
It does give us some additional collaborative space, and sometimes you may have a classroom or two that can be smaller depending on what goes in there and how many kids are going in there. So it may not have to be a special ed. It just could be a room that's slightly smaller.
The advantage to this is that this is your original program. Those special ed classrooms were meant to be smaller. So obviously you save some space and some cost, but you get locked into them in their location.
And team, correct me if I'm wrong, but the blue that are indicated here are the learning support rooms, not necessarily the autistic support, life skills, or ES.
Correct.
So the blue are just learning support.
Right.
Right, we still have, and the square footage, I'm sure you can reference as what we dedicated for AS, ES, and life skills.
Those are approximately 1,200, a hair less, and then the learning support classrooms are approximately 660.
Correct.
And does the AS support classroom then contain the sensory rooms within it in this current plan?
That's in the life skills classroom. Within the footprint that we talked about for the life skills classroom, there is a sensory room area that's partitioned off that can be shared. We moved, in meeting with the teachers, we moved the autistic support program across the hall from the life skills classroom, And you can see that on
Right here.
that floor so that they can share that.
Other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. My computer went to sleep. That's the only thing that went to sleep. We are up to community, we'll do some community, what? What, jeez, I don't read sign language.
I think, actually,
okay.
if we can,
Okay. Huh,
I'm thinking maybe we should, because we'll need it again. Well, I mean, you can switch it again later, it's up to you.
Yeah, we'll leave it. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
move to community input at this time. This is the first, this is a legislative meeting, so we have a community input now and then at the end of the meeting. So kindly step up, 4 minutes, name and where you reside in the township.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. Just to get some clarification on a couple things. On these plans, I know we had talked about at one point not having lockers or having them, or so our lockers are in on these plans. I just want to confirm that. And then is there a health class in this classroom wing and also then the gym? So the health teacher goes like to the gym and to the health class into the gym and back and forth. And did anyone maybe walk like this building? Like I took my daughter's schedule, so she had, if she had, let's say, music in the morning, she's going all the way to the classroom ring, essentially using the locker, dropping her stuff off, going all the way over to music. And then she has another core class, so now she's all the way to the right doing a core class, not a core class, another UA in 6th grade. And then she's got 2 core classes, then she's going back all the way to the cafeteria, and then she's coming back. So I'm just wondering if anyone's actually just kind of walked it or done some schedules. And how many steps is it? Like, it seems like it's more and everything, it's further than it was. So I'm just curious, like, how much more? The auxiliary gym as an alternate delete, is that trimming the size of it and cutting it that way, or is that the whole gym being cut out, and how much of a savings? I think maybe 1.4, but I don't remember if that's the right number. So I just want to confirm that. And then when we initially started this venture, we talked about the number was always 70 million. So I'm just wondering how we arrived at that 70 million. Is that all we could afford to borrow? Is that all we qualified to borrow, or is that just where we were drawing our line? So if the new building, D1, costs maybe 74 million, can we even borrow 74 million? What does that look like as far as the payment schedule goes? Where are the vice principal offices? I just couldn't see them on the plan over there. And then I guess I'm just curious as to, because I know the last time was quite scattered, so I just would like to know how far in advance the board received all these options to really go over them. Thank you.
Jenny Vitale, Ambler. First, I'm just curious about if we've talked about what grades are per floor. I want to know, 6th grade on the bottom floor, middle floor, whatever. Where are we? And on the right hand, I still don't get an answer. I got an answer on a window on the one side along the courtyard, but I'm still concerned as I'm looking at the building to the right. I asked this question already, where the grading is. How many of those classrooms on the right bottom floor are underground or have high windows because there's nothing else? And if we actually, it was mentioned at one point that one community member mentioned having the classroom annex over to the right. And if you moved it, of course, the drawing's not up there, but if you moved it over to the right and had that ball field down on the left, then it wouldn't be in a flood zone still, and neither would the classrooms be close to it. And supposedly that was considered. I wondered why it was rejected, because if we went to the right, we would avoid the bridges in the courtyard. I'm wondering if the building itself is limited in height. So if everything was over to the right, are we allowed to go 3 stories up on the right? Walking distance, I'm still a little confused about the planetarium. Of course, I see the square footage, but I wondered if we have gotten a if we have planned in that $70 million, which might at the end of this evening be $74 million already, if the equipment for inside the planetarium is in that number at all. I don't know if you got an answer. The ball field, I know you mentioned, since now it's officially one field and completely in a flood zone, and we're going to try to make it a little bit better. I'm wondering, do we have an idea? How better? Because I know, like, for example, at Fort Washington, our one ball field is unusable. And I'm wondering if our one ball field at Sandy Run will also be unusable. And first comment made was this, we're limited by our site because we're on a flood zone and it's small. But I find it curious that the exact same floor plan for Newtown Middle School fits on this exact floor plan. I mean, on this acreage, which is interesting to me. I don't see the timing. I have an email from someone who cannot attend due to a scheduling situation. Very concerned about the tier courtyard still. Wheelchair-bound students will only be able to access the top and the bottom of the courtyard, thereby adding to the sense of alienation from others on different tiers of the courtyard. Even for able-bodied students, the tiered layout does not provide flexibility of gathering varying group sizes. Imagine trying to form a circle across tiers, very awkward. Many have spoken about the difficulty in maintenance already. Bridge, is the architect's intent to make this bridge a design piece? We are told the Sandy Run design will be efficient and functional, not pursuing costly design features. Lower floor classrooms, I think I touched on that already. There's no retaining wall indicated on the plans in front of these classrooms starting from the corner of the library, so are they below grade? Even if the retaining walls plan in order to install windows, the amount and quality of natural light will be poor. Lower floor classrooms along the tiered courtyard. Even if the grading of the courtyard is adjusted to enable windows in the science rooms, the amount and quality of natural light will be poor. Has anyone in the board or around been in a partial basement space with windows facing an airway? Those spaces don't get much natural light, and these below grade classrooms are on the north side, which makes it worse. Thank you.
Anita Brister. My questions actually overlap, or almost some of them are exactly the same. I don't have as many details as Ginny and Jen because they've attended more meetings on this than I have. But here are my concerns and questions. Jen brought it up. I'd like to know what the auxiliary gym is estimated to cost. I understand you may put in, you may not. I couldn't see very well because we don't have in our handout the numbers that you put up there, but I think D1, I think it was somewhere around 2.9 million. Just verify or not verify for me what the additional cost there is for D1. This may, I don't know, this is a big thing to me. I brought this up once before, and quite honestly, I got one response. That was you, Mark. And you blew it off like, hey, it's no big deal. Scientists don't care about light. I don't know. No, you did. It was something like that. Okay, maybe I'm ad-libbing a little bit, but I have a real concern. I want to know exactly how many windows, how many classrooms are below grade. You can call it a lower floor. I call my lower floor basement in my house. And the thing is, how many rooms are below grade? What will those windows be like? When you say high windows, so I am assuming way higher than a 13, 14, or 15-year-old kid. And are they mostly the science rooms? I just don't even think that's acceptable. It seems like it's now, whether it's 70 million, whether it ends up being more than that, we're getting a brand new school with terrible light. That's not acceptable. It just seems like there should be something better. And I think one of the, I realize you're not going to go back and change too much at this point, but one of the things that I think is a real shame, which maybe came from, I don't know who, because it wasn't parents, maybe it came from some teachers and administrators. The kids, I'm not saying the annex is a perfect building by any means, but if you look at those rooms, light, they're huge. They have huge, beautiful windows. Now you could have asked an architect to design something a little bit differently. You put yourself in a situation where it's got to be right here. It's got to be so we have a baseball field in a floodplain. I mean, you put yourself in that position, the board did. You could have said, well, we can do the annex, and then in 2 years, 3 years, then we'll do 7th and 8th grade. But you wanted the whole thing now. You wanted the portables, the whatever. And you put every architect in a position, oh, we got to build it right on this kind of faulty area. But people who think that, oh my goodness, it's so wonderful to have 6th grade right there, the 6th grade could have had a beautiful brand new building and a safe breezeway, since some people think the breezeway wasn't so safe, an enclosed walkway. You made the choices, and now it sounds like we're going to have baseball fields in the floodplain that are unusable, and we're going to have skimpy windows. And just back to the question, exactly how many below grade classrooms are there, and how many skimpy windows will there be?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close community input and we'll respond to the questions. Best way to go about this, Arif, did you make notes or some notes? I can ask some questions. From the very beginning, lockers. Mark, you can address lockers. I mean, we're not.
I
we're not there
didn't
yet.
note I missed a question about lockers.
Are we having the lockers? Jen's first question.
Oh, I'm
Where are
sorry.
we with lockers? Right now, there's lockers.
Yeah, there's lockers.
We can change
as
that.
specified. It's not, that's not a detail we have to decide now, but that is, as specified right now, there's one locker per kid.
Yeah. The health class.
They have one health classroom and is in the classroom wing.
Yep. Okay. The flow that we're looking at in the building, getting from classroom wing to the music wing to the cafeteria. That the comment was made that it's further than it was.
Yeah, while he's looking that up, we can answer the auxiliary gym.
Yours,
I
yes,
had
savings.
estimated at 1.5 million.
Right. Right.
In terms of has anyone walked virtually walked the building as a real schedule? I have with my own kids' schedules. That's hardly an exhaustive look at it, but it's massively better than the current buildings. I mean, massively. It's just hard to. When you say it seems further than it was, I don't know if you mean an earlier version of one of these plans or if you mean the existing building. But oh my God, it's like half the total steps per day. I mean, if your goal is steps per day, we should leave the current building. Fitbit would be happy. You could have a schedule that does involve a lot of back and forth, but that, like my son had a schedule that was literally building to building in the first quarter, building to building in 6th grade, every period. It started in the annex, second period was in the main building, third period was in the annex. Literally the entire day was like that. And that could happen in this building. No, it really can't happen in this building because the only thing that's back there are gym and music. There's only 2 subjects. I mean, even the worst possible schedule doesn't involve that much, and every single distance is shorter than every single distance in the current building. I mean, it's massively better. But I don't think I can quantify that, other than to say it's unambiguous. It is massively better.
Okay. Robin?
I was just going to say what we could do if anybody wanted to know how far it is from a particular classroom to another particular area of the building, we can measure that and get that information. But in lieu of having the specific question, what I'd like to do is point out on this slide that if you went from one side of your existing school over here and you walked over to the other side of the annex, that's 1,076 feet. And that's the way the crow flies. If you really went through the corridors, it would be significantly longer than that and take longer to do that. The overall length of our building, our proposed building from one side to the other, at least in this scheme, was 522 feet. Almost less than half of the existing building's length. Somebody had asked the question, how long would it be if we went from the classroom all the way down at the end of the west wing here to the auxiliary gym? And the answer was 566 feet. Still about half the length of the existing building from one side to the other.
Okay, let me continue. Question was asked regarding the assistant principal offices. My understanding is on the main floor, the assistant principal's office would be in the administrative office. The other assistant principals have their own space on the lower and on the upper level with a support staff person. It's a fairly nice space. So they're basically in the center of the academic wing. Any other comment on that?
I could point out where it is,
Sure.
Art, and I think it's here. We moved it around a lot, but I believe on the ground floor, on the lower floor, it's right here, and then on the upper floor, it's right here. And it's an assistant principal's office, and then I think an office for like a secretary and
Right.
assistant.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going in order of the questions.
You did miss one if you're going in order, which was how did we end up 70 million?
Well, that's next. That's next.
Oh, I wrote them in the other order, but that's okay.
Okay. The 70 million, can we borrow more than 70 million? How did we get to the 70 million? Ms. Bray?
We used the 70 million because that, at the time when we began talking, 15 months ago, or certainly a year ago, that was the largest number that we had based on what we were assuming we would be doing. We can certainly borrow the $74 million. And how we will borrow the money, we will have multiple borrowings, and we'll continue to look at what we can afford to put in the budget each year. So there's not going to be any problem with borrowing $74 million. It will have budget implications moving forward.
Right. Okay.
Can I just clarify, the 70 million number did not come from any real analysis of how much we could afford. It came from how much would it cost to do this, to do a middle school project. And it was
Based on
about-
the ed specs.
Based on
at
ed
the
specs,
time.
which were translated to
At
square
that time.
footage, which were translated to dollars.
Right.
And actually, even the capital improvement project, our plan that we had done several years ago. So, and it was me, as the conservative business person, that wanted to take the largest number and make sure that we could afford that.
And prior to the tariffs that are currently being implemented for aluminum and steel, which is part of the additional costs. And we don't know what will happen when we open those bids. Hopefully the tariffs will be gone. So, next, we had grades per floor. I think we're still looking at that. Dr. Clark, do you have a preference right now? And of course, in 3 years, it can change.
That's
Before-
correct. But as long as I'm standing, Dr. Levinowitz, because I am the 8th grade principal and I oversee that culminating grade from the building, I would prefer to be housed on the main floor,
8th in the main.
8th on the main, and because of the science lab spaces, 6th grade on that lower floor, and 7th grade therefore on the upper.
But if the science
now.
labs turned out to be identical on the lower and upper floors, then
We could flip 6th and
Yeah.
7th, correct.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. How many classrooms are underground, windowless, skimpy windows, terrible light?
None. If you define what underground means, I'm thinking that's kind of a basement-like situation where you don't have an opportunity for windows. The grade's up higher than the floor of the room above you or the ceiling. The grade on the west side of the building that was referred to is either going to be flat across and all the classroom windows will be the same size by use of a retaining wall, or we'll look at the grading and we'll slope the grade down along that wall. But we want to keep the windows all the same size if we can, and we want to maximize their size in the classroom. On the room that faces out into the courtyard, again, that's something that we have to design, but we're confident that we can create a large enough window that will have good quality of light, even if it is north light. I'm confident of that.
Okay. There was a question about when we build the new building, are there limitations for the height? I think this is referring to possibly having the 3-story education wing closer.
There is a limitation to the height in the zoning, but until we finalize the footprint in the building, it's a very sophisticated calculation that you have to do because this building slopes down the site. So you have to get the mean average grade around the building, and then you measure the height of the building. And if we need to get a variance because the classroom wing or the stage is a little bit higher, my experience is that it's pretty easy to get a variance for a height increase.
Okay. Planetarium, my understanding is that the budget currently includes the equipment costs for the planetarium.
It includes the equipment cost for everything.
For everything.
Yes.
For everything. There was a question last time too about the ball field, about what we're going to do to make that ball field more usable.
My firm has some experience with going into ball fields that were having difficulty. They were having puddles in the out at second base, and then when you go to sweep the water off, you move the infield mix and you create dams, and it gets worse. And what we've gone in and done is put some under drain situations in the infield, between the infield and the outfield. That's worked quite well, and I'd like to look into that based on our conversation with the township a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, that we said that we would investigate that and see if we could afford it and put in a system like that that would make the fields more usable.
Okay. Question regarding this is the exact same floor plan as Newtown. Mark, is this the exact same floor plan as Newtown?
This is not the exact same floor plan as Newtown. The similarity with Newtown is that if you look at it in plan view, it goes gym and then auditorium and then cafeteria on the north side, and then it has classrooms to the south side. Other than that, it's not actually all that similar. I mean, it does have a corridor system, but the corridors are not the same. They have all their specials, art, FamCon, et cetera, are in the northern side of the building. Ours are not. I mean, and theirs is a flat site. There's some similar. I mean, every building has those three spaces, and they tend to be, at least the gym and auditorium tend to be near each other. But it's not the same.
I would add to that, Mark, that the Newtown project was designed to its site to take maximum advantage of its site from an economical standpoint. We had a flat site, so the building reflects that in its plan and section. This building, however, has to step down the site, a much more complicated site because of the slope. And I think we designed this particular building to fit your particular site, including designing it so it can be built around the existing school, and the existing school can remain in effect, not only within the school, but also the vehicles that have to serve the school before and after the school day starts or is finished.
We made a significant move. I believe the cafeteria was originally west, and we moved it east to take advantage again of the site and the light and the view from where that cafeteria is going to be seated. So
That's a good point. I forgot about that.
Right.
And then when the possible synthetic field started to develop on the west side, made a lot more sense to move the gym over there too.
Right.
So yeah, that was a good move.
Okay. So, the courtyard and slope not being ADA compliant.
We're so busy trying to get all the pieces in the right places, we haven't really spent a lot of time on the courtyard design. So I think that's just something that we want to move on to next. That will be one of our focuses of design intention. But I can't say right now whether or not we can make it accessible entirely. There's going to be places on the site that aren't accessible entirely. That's always a given. We will meet code. We will meet the ADA requirement.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Mr. Strode, I think I summarized all the questions. I'm sure there's a couple more that you'd like to respond to.
There's a question: is the bridge intended? I don't know. The word intended wasn't there. Is the bridge a design piece or a design feature, or is that? I mean, to me, that is form follows function. Not so much an architectural beauty piece. I'm putting words in somebody's mouth there, but I don't know if you want to comment on that. I mean, the bridge is there for flow.
Yeah, I think the bridge is one of the key things that makes the building flow properly, so that you don't have the problems that you're experiencing now in the connector between the annex and the existing middle school. I'm sure that's a bottleneck, and I'm sure that's a difficult space to traverse. But the bridge simply makes it so much easier to get from one side of the building to the other side of the building. I think it's worth its cost. We do plan to make it look nice. We're not going to put something ugly there, but we think we can do it economically, and we've done it on several other projects.
Anita asked for confirmation that D1 is about 2.9 million, and yeah, 2917700 is the number. And yeah, I will echo the one beautiful thing about the annex. The light in those tower classrooms is wonderful.
It's good when it's
Yeah.
90 degrees outside.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a downside to huge south-facing windows too, but they are big, beautiful south-facing windows, and something about them makes those rooms feel a lot bigger than they actually are. I was surprised when I saw actual square footages, that they're among the smallest rooms that we're using as classrooms anywhere in the complex, but they don't feel that way. And I think that's, a large measure having to do with the light.
Mark, in terms of the cost options, do you want to point out that A was already a certain amount higher, so that you look at the difference between the various options? You really need to compare those to A.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So A of the options we have in front of us is the least expensive of the options, but based on current forecasts and additional square footage that we've added in the design process, it does come out to, I'm going to steal your paper here, Stan, to almost 1.5 million above the original forecast. And everything else, it is helpful, I think, as Joan said, to look at the delta relative to A. So subtract 1.5 million of each just to see the approximate cost differences between the options. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah.
And if we do move forward, I think there will be a recommendation that we get some recommendations from the architect and Arif in terms of some additional savings. For example, the science rooms, bringing that wall in is $300,000 roughly. If we do that, or if we change those classrooms, the science rooms to light science, maybe there's some savings in there. Obviously, the structure makes it more challenging to do that, but there are more options. I think that so I see the cost. I definitely see that we can bring that wall in for a savings of $300,000, which is $300,000 significant, and then maybe some other savings. Are there any other questions from the board, or any comments from the board on the presentation?
One thing I do want to say, if I ever said anything like science people don't care about light, as a scientist and a photographer, I can't. There's no way I ever said anything like that. I would really like to see a reference. That I don't appreciate such words being put into my mouth. That is completely the antithesis of what I believe.
Okay, so we finished community input. We have announcements and communications. Ms. Bray, are there any?
There are none tonight.
Okay, there are no minutes. There are
Correct.
no recommendations from the Education Committee. No recommendations. And then we'll move on to operations. Mr. Sirota?
Thank you. So, in the operations section of the agenda, we have 4 motions. And why don't we take B first, which is the design options for Sandy Run. So we've seen the plans in the presentation. They're also linked in the agenda, and you all have them in front of you. We've seen the cost differentials between them. You also have that in front of you. I think now is the time for discussion at some point, I'll make a formal motion for one of the, can we do it in that order, or do we need to make a motion first?
Make a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve schematic design A, and then we'll see where we land and possibly amend it.
Can I move to amend it?
Is there, wait, let's have a second first. Is there a second to? Second, Ms. Good. Okay.
I move we amend the motion to say option D1.
Second.
Second is Ms. Rothman. Okay. Discussion. Okay.
Yeah, I'll make.
We could open up for discussion at this point. Yep. Any discussion?
So, A and D1 are my two favorites. D1 clearly supports the educational program the best, and that should be the top priority. I'm attracted to A primarily because it is the least expensive, and it does meet every single requirement that we've been given, you know, the difference between requirements and nices. It meets every requirement we've been given. It is the least expensive, which leaves us more budget for things like furniture, where we'd like to be really progressive, or things like additional capital funds to put into other buildings, for things potentially like additional staff down the road, et cetera. It's a significant added cost to go to one of the other options, and if we do add cost to the budget, we are eating into those things. We are potentially eating into the Ox Gym and any other alternates we have when we get there. And given that A meets every requirement that has been stated, all of them meet every requirement that has been stated, but A is the least expensive that meets all the requirements that have been stated. Given the compromises, I do like D1. I think it is the best educational plan. I think amazing teaching can happen in A as well, and because it is less expensive, I'm leaning toward A. But I will not, I will, because even more important than any of those considerations to me is moving forward. If the majority of the board prefers any of these other plans, my main goal is to move forward. So that's where I'm going to land in the end. Thank you.
Any other comments, Ms. Cherpia?
I like to disagree on A meeting the requirements, because in my opinion, collaboration is not being met in Plan A. I would prefer to go with D1 at the recommendation of the administration, and I believe also with the input of teachers, where I would like to see potential savings and is in the auditorium. I think that is a space that gets the least use in the building, and I would really like to see us be as frugal as we possibly can without skimping on actually having a stage. But I don't think we need necessarily amphitheater, bells and whistles and all that stuff. So I would be in favor of D1, but looking for savings, especially in that northern part of the building.
Thank you. Anyone else? Dr. Ludwig.
I've had some misgivings about some of the designs as we went along. I haven't been part of the core team, so sometimes it's a matter of just getting additional information and understanding the rationale for some of the decisions. But this last iteration, with the increased emphasis on teaming and being able to integrate the science classrooms into the teams, to me, for a $1.4 million, that is a cost that I think is worth it. I mean, if we're designing a building for 50 years into the future, this is one cost that I think we should undertake. And I believe if we look at the cost of the financing per year, it's adding something like $100,000 to our debt service. And I hope that we will be able to do that and still be able to include the Ox Gym, which I think is a great community asset. I would like to see whatever savings we can have, including like making the science rooms, pulling that wall in so that we can save a little bit of money there, and maybe we'll find some other savings along the way.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Ms. Rothman?
So I definitely agree with Joan. In looking at the designs, I look at things that are our priorities. What are we looking at? And I think that we're using teaming. I don't want to lock us into teaming completely, which is why we don't have pods like some of the other schools around us do. But what I really like about D1 is it has a better flow. It supports teaming, and not just that it supports, which is, I think, critical. And it also, I think, supports a better flow. I don't like option A. I don't like how most of the classrooms, most of the kids are going to be down in the one wing. So to me, D1 definitely supports teaming without locking us into teaming for the next 50 years specifically. Also, D1 gives us the collaborative space, and I think that's something that we've talked a lot about. That part of the, this building going towards what learning should be, you need collaborative space, and D1 gives us that. D1 also has the integration of special ed. That's another important point, and D1 accomplishes that goal as well. And like I said, I think it's the best flow that we can get out of the site. I think there's lots of limitations on the site itself, but this is what we have, and I think this is the best plan that we have to go forward, and I'm willing to vote for D1 tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Rothman. And Ms. Francis? Nothing? Okay. Ms. Good.
Okay. I would like to say that I do support D1 also. I think it makes a lot of sense based on all the information that's been presented. I do have to say, though, that having gone through the high school project and what took place there with respect to cutting costs or not cutting costs or adding things or not, we don't even know what we're really going to be facing. So I predict that we're going to have to do some cutting of things, and it's just going to be the way it is. But I do support this D1. I do think this is a really important step, but it doesn't. We need to prepare for anything and anything that could happen. So we have to be prepared for making cuts.
Anyone else? Mr. Sirota.
Dr. Kim asked me to state his preference, which is, and of course he hasn't heard all this conversation. This is before the meeting, but his preferences were for C1 or D, and I do mean D, not D1. And that was because his primary concern was maximizing flow and small group collaboration. And I just wanted to make sure I said that because I did have that conversation with him earlier. And I did want to add, just regarding the trade-offs of money versus better, I do think D1 is better. I do think A is cheaper. And whenever we optimize for something, it's always at the expense of something else. My preference would be to optimize for cost at this point. But it is the case that last week we went low on the revenue side. So going high on the expense side seems to be going the other way. And as I said last week, if we went low on the revenue side, we need to be thinking about going low on the expense side, and that does not appear to be what's happening here tonight. But again, my main goal is to move forward. So if the will of the board is D1, it is my favorite plan. I'm not going to say no.
Okay. Mr. Rofsky?
I think Delena's vote 1 week was very productive, and that staff and board members' concerns were addressed.
Any other comments, Mrs. Francis?
I think with an investment this large, yes, of course, we have netted out at a potentially more expensive solution, but we also haven't put the project out to bid yet. We don't know what kind of creative solutions that the potential general contractor might come up with. We don't know how much steel we're going to use. So I certainly hope that creativity will continue to be a part of the discussion in terms of how to bring us closer to where we wanted to be, because it would seem silly to be penny wise and pound foolish at this point with such a huge investment, not only for this community, but for the students and staff at Sandy Run.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, my comments are the I'll use the word, I don't support any of the plans. I'm excited about the plans. I'm excited about all these plans. I'm particularly excited about D1. I'm excited about D1. Until I saw D1, I supported some of the other plans. But when I look at D1, if we're moving forward with the 70, 72, 73 million, we need to be excited about the building. We need to be excited and picture ourselves in that building and how much it's going to better deliver and how much the students, the community, everyone is going to really appreciate all the time and effort that we put into this project. For me, the additional cost moving to D1, it's a difference of just supporting A or being excited about D1. So I think it meets all of the needs. It's more costly because we are bringing in special ed, we're bringing in the science rooms, and it just makes a lot more sense. So as we move forward, I encourage the board to, unfortunately, we hear some comments from the community, and I respect the comments from the community, but we don't hear the positive, and that's very important to hear. I think when this building is built, we need to understand what we're building. We need to be excited about the project, and I think going with D1, we will be. Okay, so we have a motion to amend the motion. This would be Dr. Ludwig made the motion. It was seconded by Ms. Rothman, which was to amend the motion from A to D1. Okay, so we will vote on that. That'll be a roll call vote. We don't need a roll call vote. So all those in favor of amending the original motion, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, one opposed. Okay, so 7-1. Okay, so now we have a motion on the floor to move forward with design D1 to approve the schematic. This board approves the schematic design option D1 as indicated in our agenda. So we just vote. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Sirota, back to you.
So now that we have done that, we can move on to C under the Operations Committee recommended. No, I'll come back to A.
We'll come back to A, yeah.
The Board of Directors, I move that the Board of Directors approve PlanCon A and B submission with schematic design option D1 with a budget increase of, and now is this the number? Is this the correct number for of 2.9?
No.
2 million, no?
We're going to do the delta.
Okay.
It's $1,461,762, and the difference between what you see there of the 2,917,700 minus 1,484,600 is 1,433,100, and then we multiply it by 1.02 for the financing. So the exact number is 1,462,762.
So 1,462,762. Thank you. So, and we further authorize the architect.
1 million, sorry, let me just say that again. 1,461,762.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
I won't try to repeat it because I'll probably get it wrong.
1,461,762. All together
now. So we further authorize the architect, the resident project engineer, and the administration to make final adjustments to the PlanCon A and B documents to comply with option D1. And then the modified PlanCon A and B documents will be ratified at the next board meeting.
Second.
Okay, first and second. Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
I'll move on to
D.
number D, which also needs to be submitted with PlanCon. So I move that we approve the district-wide facilities study in the form presented, which was the July 2017 facility study.
Yep, without any of the updates.
Correct.
That has been made. Yep, we have Ms. Rothman, second. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving back to A.
All right, so moving back to A, so we have a motion so I'm going to ask can I ask Arif to brief us on this before we
Yeah, I
make
think
the
that would be
motion?
beneficial. Yep.
So as I said initially when I gave you the update of the different options, what we're looking at is, I apologize this is turned, but we wanted to make sure you could actually see it. So obviously you got the main building here, here's the annex, and what we've been working very hard on is to try to come up with the best location and the most efficient solution to replacing the classrooms. Oops, I did it wrong there. Okay. Go back, right there. To find a solution for the modular classrooms. We've worked with the administration and we're looking at 20 modular classrooms with some bathrooms. So what we've come up with is, if you're familiar with the building, and I'll show you that on this floor plan in a minute, is there's the hallway right here that is called the music hallway, Mark, versus I called it the locker room. You're walking right down and here's the locker rooms for the gymnasium.
Yep, that's right. There's music on one side and locker rooms
Right.
on the other.
And the flagpole is right here. Or actually, the flagpole is right about there, where the arrow is. So we'd have a stick-built connecting corridor that would then go to a ramp, and then these would be the modular classrooms, 10 on one side and 10 on the other, with another exit over there. So we think it's a very efficient layout in terms of getting students in and out without being outside in inclement weather. This can be locked with card access, and there'll be exit here. So there's many opportunities, in fact, for the gymnasium functions. They can come in through there as well. If you go to the next plan here, this is what's called an evacuation plan that we've developed. We've already met preliminarily with the fire marshal and the township code official, and we've got this plan in terms of having to do very little to the existing building to get this accomplished. The boiler room is right here in the current building, so we can tie in sanitary, water, and everything right here in close proximity. And the big thing that's affected is, if you go back to this plan, there's a little bit of parking affected here. So we're able to recreate a little bit of that parking there, a little bit there, and we're going to create some right here. Again, we don't think these are ever going to really be used unless you have a major event there, which is the 2 or 3 times a year, back to school night or something. The other advantage of this is we can use this for some contractor parking down here, because this is the area we'll be going into the construction zone. And then we can create a nice separation right here. You follow this line right down here. And we're going to come to you with phasing plans. So this is just the first step of that phasing. But we found a good solution for the modulars. The reason we want to proceed with this is we want to request a waiver from land development. We've talked to the township about that. So we can hopefully just get a building permit and a grading permit to do this work. The benefit of keeping this on its own track is, if for whatever reason we are behind schedule, which we are right now on the land development approvals for the main building, these will be in and ready and operational. We need to contract for those probably by the end of this year, so that they could be fabricated, and come June of 2019, they're being installed. So come August of 2019, September, the school is functioning. Actually, it looks like a pretty nice school, right there. Not as efficient as the new one, but starts to look like a school right here. So that'd be functional, and then we can do the demolition of the annex, whether it happens to be September, whether it happens to be October, depending how our approvals go. We have flexibility built in. Okay, so I think that gives us that option, but also I think we've got a really efficient solution. We actually had 3 options for this, but we're only showing you one option. There are no options for the modulars.
Arif, before you step away, can you clarify how traffic flows?
Sure.
Bus traffic,
Yes,
morning,
okay.
afternoon, et cetera?
Really good point. So right now, what's going to happen here is we have to work out a few of the logistics, but what we have to do is this driveway, this shaded area, we're going to have to just extend that driveway around so that the buses will enter. They'll now enter off of Twining, thank you, and they will exit off of Audubon like they currently do. Right now, they actually come in and out of Audubon, but under this scenario, we're going to have them come in off of Twining and exit, go back out and exit off Audubon. So this is under the temporary scenario only, okay? We're not talking about the permanent, just for this temporary, 2+ years, okay, of temporary. We're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep, go back. Anyway, we're going to keep the parent drop-off still near the cafeteria in that zone. And we're going to look at dropping the buses. The buses are going to drop off in that upper part and then exit out. So we're going to try
And
to
there's still a
keep-
little bit of guest parking, and the main entrance remains the main entrance.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes. I wish I could go back. Why it's not?
Okay.
There we, all right, thank you.
So I would like to, thank you. So I would like to make a motion as written under item A, under the Operations Committee recommendations.
Second.
First and second, this is item A in operations. Any comments or questions from the board? I think this is a very neat, clean solution. Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that concludes the operations. There's nothing in finance, personnel, policy, and other business. We have an exchange student, Dr. Ludwig. Can you do the exchange student since it kind of connects to education?
Okay, I move we approve placement of one student in Upper Dublin High School for the first semester of the 2018-19 school year.
Okay, is there a second? Second, Ms. Rothman. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, the exchange student, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, are there any liaison committee reports since we did them last week? Seeing none, solicitor report, Mr. Roos. Sunshine announcements? Okay. Our next legislative meeting will be July 16th in this room. We're now up to our second community input. Kindly step up to the podium, state your name, where you reside in the township. We limit it to 4 minutes.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. I just wanted to clarify when I was asking about schedule, I know 6th grade's coming from the annex, but 7th and 8th is pretty tight in there. So, it's a little bit of an exaggeration to say about the travel path, I guess, is so much worse right now almost. That's if you're coming from the annex. But if you're in the 7th and 8th grade, it's not such a bad trip around. And Mark, talking about his son's schedule, was before the schedule change. And if you're in advanced classes, then you were ping-ponging back. But all that was resolved. So I just kind of want to clarify that. And also, I just want to say, I do appreciate the fact that if we are going down this road, we are doing it right, and we're, what that cost is. Okay, so I do appreciate that, but I also don't want to hear 2, 3, 4 months from now, next year, when we need things or we can't afford things, that it's because we picked Plan D1. It's because we're building the building, period. That's why we won't be able to afford additional teaching positions, or maybe the contract negotiations might get a little sketchy, or all of those things. It's because we're building the building, not because we picked Plan D1 because it was 1.461762 more expensive. Thank you.
Jenny Vitale, Ambler. The one question that I did have that was not answered, I believe, is if we actually considered the classrooms to the right. I know it's all voted on, but I am curious. That's why I keep asking. I'm not being negative, just curious. Actually considered the classroom annex over to the right of the whole thing, so we didn't have a grading situation, we didn't have a bridge situation, we didn't have a courtyard situation, and we wouldn't have all of our ball fields in the flood zone. And then why was it rejected? I didn't get that answer. And I'm sorry, but I mean, I don't want to be a pain about this, but I'm looking at Newtown's floor plan, and the main part of the building, you know, it might be a health room in a different location, but this is like the exact same building. Cafeteria's on the same side, the gyms are the same location, the locker rooms, and I just find it quite interesting that it's exactly the same as the current building that's being done. And I'm about the modules. It seems very skinny, the flow of coming through that one little hallway down the hallway, sixth grade. And so now we're coming versus the breezeway. It just seems really thin, but someone could give me, I know that hallway actually by the music room and the gym, we just had ice cream there the other day, is pretty skinny itself. And so is this as skinny as that, or is it a little wider, or does it just look skinny here? And then I guess on the new building, how are the buses? I don't know if I know the car flow of the new building, where everything's coming in. Can someone just draw me where the buses are coming in and out and where the parents are coming in and out on the new building? That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Consider the classrooms to the right. Anybody comment on that? I'm not sure how far over to the right, but
I think I know.
the height would be an issue.
We had a meeting with the concerned citizen from the school district who had some ideas, and
Right.
we looked into that scheme, and we moved the 2 classrooms to the right. We ended up with about, I think, a 40-foot courtyard between 2 long 3-story classroom wings. So that was a negative there. So you're looking out one classroom wing right into the other classroom wing. The other negative was that the more northern classroom wing, actually all the windows in the ground floor classroom facing north would be completely below grade. I think it was about 8 to 10 classrooms that would have no windows at all, because that design requires a flat site. So not only were we digging that classroom wing into the grade and losing windows, when you got to the other side where the cafeteria was, it was 13 feet up above the grade, which means you have a considerable amount of fill, and you're going to have deep foundations, which are going to offset any savings. So the scheme really didn't work. The other part of it was that the loading dock, the garbage cans, all those things were right next to the main entrance.
Right.
There is also the height of that 3-story classroom wing is all the way at the highest part of the site against the neighborhood.
That's a good point. Yeah, so it'll block the views.
Yeah, I mean, we did look at that. We did discuss it. The hallway regarding the modulars, it's a good question in terms of there's going to be so many students coming in from the modulars into the main building that the width of that entrance.
Yeah, it is a standard hallway. You know, it's a 10-foot corridor, so we have them everywhere. It is a temporary situation. I can't really find a better place to locate those modulars, so, you know, there is another way out of the modulars. We've talked about that on the backside, and you can enter into the planetarium hallway, but you have to exit out. We're not going to make another connecting hallway.
Right.
So, you know, if there is a real concern, maybe we could fence a portion of that, and, you know, most of the time, if the weather's good, you could walk outside and connect through there. These are some logistics.
I think it's a topic to discuss with the principal. I know at the high school we did have some options. Some of the students did go outside.
But I will tell you this: it's no different than any hallway. So any hallway you go, like even the breezeway now, it's a 6-foot wide door opening. So no matter how wide the hallway is, you're all going through that 6-foot wide doorway, and there's a 6-foot wide doorway right where I'm putting the modular connection. So, you know, the doorway is going to limit the flow at some point.
Arif, I think she was maybe thinking the hallway in the trailer, in the modulars. How wide is that hallway?
Yeah, so those are going to be 8 foot.
8 foot wide?
Yeah.
Okay, the bathrooms are going to be...
The bathrooms are going to be right when you come in, and again, the bathroom count for the entire facility as it functions, we have more than enough bathrooms. What we decided is we're going to have a small set of bathrooms at the modulars so that if, you know, the students are during the class there, they can go right there. They don't have to come out. But I think eventually when they're going to cafeteria and they're going down, there's plenty of bathrooms, you know, currently that exist there. And then we will have one faculty bathroom, we're thinking also in that, again, in the modular.
They have air conditioning,
Will they be air
Modules?
conditioned?
Yes. and they're ADA compliance.
Completely ADA compliant.
Thank you.
That was my question.
You mentioned that there's a ramp,
Yes.
so that ramp will be ADA compliant.
Yeah, the ramp, because the modulars sit up a little bit, they're driven out on a trailer bed, so they sit up a little bit.
I know when we were looking at sketches of the entire facility, we spoke a number of times on the buses, and I don't know if you can describe that without the floor plan out, but we have talked about how the buses would come in and exit. And
Yeah, I'm sorry I shut down my computer prematurely, but the buses, it's intended, I believe we're still on the same page about this. It's intended that the buses will come off Twining Road, go across the existing bridge, and then they'll drive up on the west side of the parking lot. And then they come in, they can go, make a right turn, a hard right turn, and then they can park on a chevron 45-degree angle all the way in towards the front entrance. And then when they leave, they can peel off and go up around the field, the new field that we're creating, and right back down and out over the bridge. You still have the possibility that some could go towards Autobahn, but I'm recommending that you don't do that. And I think after we get the traffic consultant in, that will be confirmed.
The other part of that question was for parent drop-off, which is in over that same bridge, and then you take a right to go along the building toward the main entrance.
Right, instead of staying where the buses are on the periphery of the parking lot, all the way on the west by the property line, they would make a right as soon as they get across the bridge, and they would angle right in towards the main entrance, parallel to the west wing, the west three-story classroom wing, and the drop-off could be all through there. There could be a very long drop-off area and queuing area.
I believe we addressed the questions. Mr. Sirota, anything else you'd like to add? Okay. At this point, comments, any closing comments from the board? Mr. Rofsky.
I want to just thank Dr. Wheeler for her 4 years. This is her last meeting, and we wish her well.
Thank you. Any other? Dr. Wheeler.
Thank you, I appreciate that. As I leave, as I head for the door, I want to thank the board for moving forward and approving the schematic design. It is a great comfort to know that this project, which is so necessary, is moving forward and has support from the board. Congratulations on that, and thank you for making it that much easier for me to have peace of mind as I head to the exit.
Again, congratulations. Motion to adjourn. Okay, second? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we will see everybody in July.